Hello everyone. My name is Emma and this is Learn from the Past, a channel where I geek out about cool history stuff and you hopefully learn some cool history stuff. Let's get started. Today we're going to try something new. This is the first video in a new series that I would like to try called Become an Amateur Historian, where I talk about doing research, trying to learn history, and tips, tricks, and discussions for doing your own research. Today, I want to talk about biographies, the pros and cons and biases that affect how we use them as historical sources. Let's get started. So, biographies. Biographies, as you well know, are a type of book that focuses on the life of a single individual, often chronicling as much of their life from birth to death as the author can find sufficient information on. They can be interesting if the subject was an interesting person, but they need to be read critically. Biographies, like any historical source, are prone to preservation and presentism bias. Preservation bias being the idea that we have all of the possible information and that none of it has been lost to time. This idea is obviously false. The more time between your research subject and the present, the more information has likely been lost forever. Assuming that you'll be able to fill in the gaps is a pitfall of many historical sources, and one that readers need to be able to recognize. Another common bias found in historical research is something called presentism. Presentism is the tendency to compare historical events and information to modern morals and ethics. To decide that something someone did was right or wrong because it would be considered so by today's standards. These biases show up in historical sources of all kinds because the people who write history are human, and humans are biased. We just are. Margaret de la Comte, in her essay for Anthropology and Education Quarterly, pointed out that certain fields in academia are more prone to dangerously deceptive bias because of the inherent feeling of scholarship and correctness associated with academic fields. That is, the more we trust the veracity of a source, the more likely we are to read opinion therein as fact. This may make it hard to recognize bias in academic sources. Biographies specifically tend toward bias because there are likely more gaps in the record than there are with broader histories. I mean, think about it. When you're researching an event or a series of events, there are other things going on at the same time. If there's a gap in the record, it's perfectly acceptable for the narrative to move in space to something else relevant happening around the same time. Biographies, on the other hand, are limited in scope and are therefore limited to their subjects. This means that if there's a gap in the record, the biographer can't just jump over to a more solid foundation somewhere else. The biographer is stuck with their subject, even in those times when there's really nothing to say. So how do these gaps in the record get filled in? This is an important question to ask when doing any kind of historical research, but it's especially important when reading biographies, which, as we've just discussed, are more prone to gaps. These gaps in biographies are often filled with huge speculation or simply a note that the author doesn't have the answer to these particular questions. But it's important to keep asking the question, how is the author filling the gaps? Does this speculation mean that we can't read biographies? That we can't use them as sources? Of course not. What it means is that we need to supplement biographies with other types of sources, that we need to double check our facts, and we need to learn to recognize bias in historical sources of any kind. So, to get you started, here is an incomplete list of ways to recognize bias. when the author states that something was right or wrong, or should not have happened. When an author speculates on what a subject may have been thinking or feeling. Unless, of course, they are quoting the subject or the subject's writings. When an author speculates and uses words like could, may, might, probably, etc. It's important to note that most biographers are well-versed in historical research and have likely read tons and tons and tons of first-person sources, and are perhaps more qualified to speculate than the average layperson. But at the end of the day, educated guesses are still guesses, and it's important to be able to recognize them in the sources you look at. And my final tip, the more you read, the more research you do, the better you'll get at recognizing bias in your sources. So yes, there are issues with biographies. It may be completely impossible to eliminate bias in a field that so often requires supplementing to fill in the gaps in our concrete knowledge. But if we can recognize the inherent bias in this format and take note of those biases when we encounter them, biographies can still be an important source. Unlike broader historical sources, biographies offer perspective and experience. Instead of being told what happened to a faceless mass of historical players, we can see how historical events impacted the real people who lived them on a much more personal level. We can watch a change happening in real time, decades, centuries, and millennia later, because biographies are told through the lens of a single protagonist. When looking for smaller details, biographies are a great place to search. Biographers often look specifically for small details to fill out the story and to bring their subject to life in the minds of the readers. So basically, go ahead. Read biographies. But as with all you read, read critically and understand that there will be bias. And don't ever use a biography as your only source. Actually, don't ever use anything as your only source. Try to find the same information in at least 2 sources to verify it before counting it as fact. And of course, watch for wording. Thank you so much for watching. This video is part of a new series that I'm trying called Become an Amateur Historian, where I talk about the nitty-gritty of doing historical research. Let me know in the comments if you enjoyed this video and if you'd be interested in more like it. If you enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up too. That'll help me know that you'd watch more of this type of video in the future. If you didn't enjoy it, give it a thumbs down and tell me what you didn't like about it in the comment section below. Do you have strong feelings about biographies? Do you have weak feelings about biographies? Have you read biographies before? What do you think? I'm interested to see if other people share my opinions, so let's turn this into a discussion below. If you're interested in more nerdy history content, be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to get notified about new videos, which I post every other Friday. Thank you so much for watching. And remember, those who don't learn from the past are doomed to repeat it. So don't doom yourself. I'll see you next time. Bye.